Well, good morning and welcome to Live Impact News here on 13 News Now Plus. It is 10:02 a.m., May 4th, and it is a Monday morning here. We embark on another week of Live Impact News, on another week of life in general. I'm Connor Reel. As always, I'm joined by the super producer, Sarah Calloway, who's in the house. Sarah, I did not have the aura to pull it off, but if you would like to do some May the 4th be with you stuff, I'm open to it.
Don't put that on me.
Well, we have the perfect person to put it on. No worries, because meteorologist Craig Moeller is back after 7 days off the coast of Antarctica, deep sea ice diving.
Yeah.
He has returned.
A little time. Yeah, I was looking for the Ark. Couldn't find it. Yeah, I was doing some stuff, Indiana Jones stuff.
Right, as you do.
Can I start off by saying I'm a little disappointed, Sarah?
Ooh.
Why?
Is she wearing space buns today?
Like a Princess Leia deal.
Princess Leia, I would think. She's got her Han Solo jacket on, so it's kind of working a little bit.
Right.
I feel like you guys think that I'm a huge Star Wars fan.
I think that I used to think you were pretty cool and up on this stuff.
I think that you're a big Linkin Park fan, and those people typically do like modern Star Wars as well. Not that I'm not. I also am in that category, so I'm not mad at you.
Linkin Park.
Is that not? Are you not a huge Linkin Breaking
no,
the Habit?
I do like Linkin Park.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do like Star Wars too, but it's not like I grew up watching it, but I've never been like a huge
I gotcha.
Star Wars
So
person.
as a little kid, I loved it, but then I got my kids, which are about Sarah's age, and maybe yours too. But I would take them to like the second round of Star Wars movies, and it's a big bonding thing.
It definitely is. We did go to Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace.
Yes.
Me, my brother, my dad, and I all went together. Now, you say she doesn't have the Princess Leia buns. Sarah and I were told that you would have a Luke Skywalker bowl cut coming in here today.
You know, this is just a wig. That's all this is. Underneath this, it's the bowl cut. No, and real quick, Linkin Park, I always think of like Transformers. Why are you going Linkin Park?
Well, they absolutely nailed the Transformers.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, yeah.
So let's do this. Let's do this proper. All right. Let's take Max 1 full. Okay, our weather computer. Do you want to do this? No, I don't. Should we split screen? That's fine. All right.
Oh, he's already got a whole
Check it out.
thing.
It is May the 4th,
Oh,
and we're
yeah.
taking aim on this planet. Fire up the Death Star, and boom. Planet gone. May the 4th be with you. It's Monday, and our high today, 78 degrees with mostly sunny skies. Note that technical font from 1981, I think, or 82. That's pretty technical. Anyway.
This is strong.
Do you guys remember the Death Star?
It does. We do remember the Death Star, but it does appear as though we're inside of one of the enemy ships here, right? Isn't that?
No. Like I said, we took aim from. This is just one of the observation decks on the Death Star. Yeah. Come on, Connor. Got to explain everything. Yeah, the giant, hairy walking dog, that's a Wookiee. Okay?
I'm sorry. There's been a lot of scuttlebutt as to whether or not you're a Sith Lord. So I'm just trying to, trying to parse through these things.
I am not a Sith Lord, although I'm starting to resemble, I think, the Emperor more and more in my old age. Let's move on to the forecast, guys. I apologize now for wasting part of your day here on the 4th. It is fun, though. All right, so the high temperature yesterday was 63 degrees. Our normal high is 75. Today, so far, we've been to 66, but we're going to hit highs today in the mid to upper 70s. So we're going to be about 15 degrees warmer than yesterday. It was cool on Saturday, cool last Friday. We've been below average pretty much over the last week or so. Wednesday, we were close to average, but it's been a cool stretch. That changes today, mid to upper 70s. Lots and lots of sunshine, and then tomorrow and the day after, it gets even warmer. We'll be up into the low 80s. Get ready for that. All right, we do need rain desperately. We are 4.93 inches below average, and we were talking about that. That's moderate drought for the immediate metro area, but more and more of our area under severe drought. That includes Williamsburg, parts of York County, all of the Middle Peninsula, the Northern Neck, parts of much of the Eastern Shore, all under this severe drought, as well as areas south of the Albemarle Sound. Then you get out towards Emporia, Roanoke Rapids, much of North Carolina under extreme drought. We had a few sprinkles out to the west, nothing impacting the metro, and skies are now mostly sunny. So we've got a weak little surface trough. I think there'll be some more storms back in the Midwest, but not for us today. Today we're going to see the sunshine through the afternoon. Again, highs in the mid to upper 70s. You see that there across the area. Few showers maybe in central Virginia, but they keep fizzling out as they move closer to the coast. And then tomorrow, another mostly sunny day. Winds southwest tomorrow, picking up a bit, will be a little breezy. And those winds from the south and southwest are going to push temperatures up into the low 80s. So warmer weather coming up as we look ahead to Wednesday. More clouds. You see the showers there back in the pictures by early, say, Wednesday afternoon and Wednesday evening. Chances for showers, better chances for rain to develop as we get into Thursday. Look at that. Finally, some more significant scattered wet weather coming in Thursday, and we do need it. So here's a look at the forecast for today. We're going to see highs upper 70s across the south side, a lot of sunshine. To the north, closer to 70 on the eastern shore, mid-70s for Matthews, upper 70s for northeast North Carolina, and down south, temperatures upper 70s as well. Here's a 7-day forecast. Our temperatures are going to stay warm through Wednesday, cool down a bit to finish out the week, and then for Mother's Day, the weekend looks good, 75 and partly sunny. So remember to take care of Mom.
Absolutely. Great advice
Yeah.
from Craig Moeller.
Don't
And this
forget
is
Mom.
can we just add that this is a really beautiful looking 7-day that you've presented us here. I mean, this is some really enjoyable weather. A little
Yeah.
bit of rain, but rain that we need. And then this is just fully spring shorts, T-shirts. I mean, we're here. We did it.
Mid-70s, now the normal high. So when we have days like today and what we're having this upcoming weekend, this is how it should be. Actually, tomorrow, Wednesday, will be above average with temperatures up in the low 80s. And I think a lot of folks are going to be excited to take advantage of the beaches and to get out and
Totally.
enjoy the warmer weather.
I feel exhilarated about what's to come here. This is great. Now, we're going to take a look at one of our live cameras before we go to break here because it actually is weather related. This came up about 30 minutes ago. We've got Maricopa County, Arizona, the Hazen Fire Aerials. This is a brush fire that's been burning in Arizona here, I think, throughout maybe the last 2 days or so. I'm still trying to gather more information, but as you can see, multiple smoky areas. Craig, there's a little water over there, it looks like, but otherwise, this just looks like a dry area here.
Yeah, you've got a reservoir there, but man, they have been dry. I will say with Arizona, if we take a look at the drought monitor right now on Weather One, Sarah, you can pull that up. They're actually in moderate drought across much of Arizona, which is much better than they were before. I mean, remember, they were extremely dry around the Four Corners area. They still have some extreme drought, but much of Arizona actually kind of in moderate drought. So they've done a little bit better, but brush fires concern there. And I'll tell you, there's an elevated risk of fires in the central U.S. and blowing dust back across parts of Illinois, something that they don't deal with a lot, but they have had a few blowing dust advisories as well. So some parts of the country dealing with it. We need the rain here in Hampton Roads. And look at the southeast U.S. So much of that part of the country under extreme to exceptional drought. Same deal in northwest Colorado. Sarah, we were talking about that on the weather desk. More counties trying to find ways to conserve water there in Colorado.
And right before we go to break, I'll just do a small amount of background just based on the little bit of information I have here from 12 News, one of our affiliate stations. We got a brush fire here. It's grown to nearly 1,000 acres. As we get closer, you can see just how intense it actually is. This is also a situation where, as of the latest update, 3:57 a.m., this fire is 0% contained. 0% contained. And there is a lot of stuff in this area, including an equestrian and event center in Buckeye. And so this Hazen fire, as it's being described, continues to sort of grow in that area with no containment whatsoever. We see those aerial views and it looks a little smaller, but once you get a little closer in, you can see that this is a intensely burning fire here. So we're going to keep an eye on that as we go. And if we get any updates on any sort of progress on containing that fire, we'll bring them to you on Live Impact News. For now, though, we're going to take a brief commercial break. When we get back, we're going to stick with Craig for some more elevated weather coverage.
Yeah, a big week coming up. We are going to explain why now is the time to prepare for the hurricane season. Some important information to share right after the break.
Okay, that's next. All right, welcome back to Live Impact News here. 10:13 a.m. We're going to continue with our weather coverage, but from a bit of a different angle here. This is some future preparation as we approach hurricane season. Craig, what are we looking at?
Yeah, so this is the time to prepare for the upcoming Atlantic hurricane season. It is literally Hurricane Preparedness Week. Now, this isn't just a Virginia thing or a Hampton Roads thing. This is a National Hurricane Preparedness Week. And the reason that they are doing this now, you're saying, well, we're not quite into hurricane season. We're not yet. That starts June 1 and it runs through the end of November. So now is the time to start preparing your home. These are the things that the Hurricane Center and emergency managers are really stressing. Prepare your home now. Make sure you have your flood insurance in place. I did myself. I went back, made sure everything was paid up last month. And keep in mind, while the official start of hurricane season is June 1, doesn't always, hurricanes don't always follow, the calendar. And over the last decade or so, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but we have had some early season tropical development where we've had tropical systems in May. And there was some discussion at one point of even starting to expand with climate change a little bit, expanding that hurricane season in the Atlantic Basin a little earlier. Now, remember, what was one of the big things we talked about a few weeks ago before I went on vacation? Something going on in the Pacific. You remember me talking about an ocean temperature shift? Spanish name?
El Nino.
El Nino.
Yes.
Which is Spanish for the Nino. I love that joke. That's an old SNL gag. No, for the child or the baby boy, right? The El Nino represents an abnormal warming of the sea surface temperatures in the eastern Pacific. First noted around the coast of Peru, and we noticed that, and this has been going on for centuries, that we've been aware of. But this is something that this pattern shift with the weather, when we get into these El Ninos, which it's believed we're going to have a strong El Nino later this season and through the winter into next spring, potentially. If we get it, kind of historically, the global pattern shifts tend to suppress or reduce the hurricane development in the Atlantic Basin. That's great news for us. Now, those hurricanes can bring some needed tropical rains to the southeast U.S., so you have to weigh the good and the bad. But the bottom line is, while the hurricane forecast for the upcoming season is a little bit lower than it has been for the past several years, you still need to be prepared. It doesn't matter. You only need one tropical system to wreak havoc and make it the worst hurricane season on record where you live if that hurricane hits your location. So what the Department of Emergency Management, what NOAA, the National Hurricane Center, what all of the officials are saying is take the time now to prepare your home. So what can you do? Make sure your insurance is in place. You can't wait until Hurricane Dorothy's bearing down on you, because at that point the insurance company's like, whoa. We're not going to do this now because the system's coming in. That's a bad risk for them. There's a waiting period before it goes into place. Make sure you've got it now. The other thing is know your zone. You can go to the VA Department of Emergency Management. If you do a Google search on Know Your Zone, you'll be able to follow the links there. It's a great resource, and they have all of Hampton Roads broken down into different flood zones and risks and evacuation zones. It's interesting. I live very close to the Chesapeake Bay on one of the inlets on Little Creek, and my house specifically is in flood zone C. But across the street, literally across the street, the drop-off is significant enough that it's a flood zone A. So when you take a look, you can zoom in a little bit. Here, I can show you some of the different examples, Sarah, while this is up. Let me show you some of the areas. This is great. I'm glad we can do this live. This is why I love Live Impact News. Sarah's like, wait, Craig's taking over the control here. That's zooming out. Here's zooming in. Okay, for instance, you take a look. Let's just pick this area here around Little Creek Inlet, okay? And as we zoom in, you see all these A's and B's. Okay, we're going to get here. That'll fill in the colors here in just a second. You see all those areas in flood zone A. Okay, these areas here where the cursor is, these would all be so prone to flooding, okay? But you can see like East Beach is in flood zone C. On the other side, Little Creek, you head over this way and you've got flood zone B right there in this orange color right along the coast. over to the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, parts of the areas around the Lessner Bridge. On the west side of the Lessner Bridge, flood zone B, but then you get over here on the east side or the ocean side of the Lessner Bridge, it's flood zone A. Then you get over towards Fort Story, you get these areas that are high. You can literally break it down where you are. And when the Department of Emergency Management calls for an evacuation, they may say flood zones A and B need to go. If you live in flood zone C, you're okay. But you also have to know what your vulnerabilities are. You look at this, okay? You've got 64. This is a route out. You can see, though, Willoughby is under an A. Naval Station, Norfolk, flood zone B. You get into some of these communities there in Norfolk, flood zone C. Same thing, you look around the Elizabeth River, you can see the various zones. So this is a great resource, and it's just important that you know what your vulnerabilities are and your risk. I forgot I walked away from the microphone. Sarah, you're so great. She's like spinning the mic towards me.
You're like going rogue. I'm like, okay.
She's like, where's he going?
Got to be ready for anything when we
That's
got
why
Craig
I said
here.
nobody puts baby in a corner.
That's right.
It. That's it. You just I get out and I do my
You
best.
escaped your corner with no issue whatsoever. You were out and about. It's also amazing how specific those zones are drawn. They clearly put a lot of effort into it.
That's my point, though. I wanted to zoom in and show you that it can literally be street to street depending on where you are, what your vulnerabilities are. So I highly recommend, if you've never spent time, and it's honestly something that before I purchased my homes, when I first came here and brought a young family here, we wanted to be in one of the highest points of Hampton Roads. Well, we've since, in the last 25 years, said, well, we want to be closer to the water, and we understand what the risks are. But just knowing, hey, I'm okay with being able to up and go. If you are not able to move, you might want to, consider getting a place that's less vulnerable to the flooding.
Do those zones impact your insurance policies and your rates?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, some places you're not required to get flood insurance. Some areas it's highly recommended that you are. And depending on what your vulnerabilities are, insurance companies will carry different rates. So it's all good information to have. And that's, again, what the Department of Emergency Management says. This is how, we go about it, and understanding which areas are most susceptible to potential flooding. In addition to that, okay, think about tree limbs, maybe dead trees, or, think about trees that may be kind of on their last leg, or shallow root systems or whatever.
Their last limb?
What's that?
Their last limb?
They're on their last limb, literally. You might want to, take the time before anything is even threatening us to prune those things back. You just want to make sure your property is good to go. And again, understand the risks from storm surge, understand if your area is really susceptible to freshwater flooding. Like we've got some storm drains that are really back up quickly in heavy rain. So while we're good as far as an elevation, I don't worry so much about the storm surge, I am very concerned about extremely heavy rain because that can create other issues. So just understanding that, having a plan in place and making sure your insurance are up to date, that's what's most important, and why they have hurricane preparedness week.
It's that medical term, right? Preventative care.
Yeah.
If you do these things now, in the long run, it'll be helpful for your safety and those around you. Okay, Craig, always helpful, and we can rest assured there will be plenty of hurricane coverage as we approach that June 1st date. Every single different angle you could imagine to protect yourself in the event of a disaster like that will be covered. And don't look now, but that's less than a month away.
Yeah, it's coming up. And again, hopefully we won't have as active a season due to this developing El Nino. If all this plays out, maybe we'll get a little bit less stressful season. But I can promise you our team will not drop its guard. We're watching everything. And again, even if you only have 2 hurricanes in a season, if one of those impacts Hampton Roads, it's all we're going to be talking about for months.
Okay.
So, yeah, we just have to be ready and understand that if anything does happen, we'll keep you updated.
Very good. Craig Moeller, ladies and gentlemen, back in the studio again after a well-deserved week of vacation. Now, we are going to take a 2-minute vacation here on Live Impact News. We're going to be back right after this commercial to start going through some of our major news stories to start this week, including a live event that is gearing up to start right now. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back here on Live Impact News. We return back to the live aerial view that we saw just a little bit earlier here in Arizona. This is, again, Maricopa County, Arizona, the Hazen Fire. These are aerial shots, and you see that continues to rage on despite that reservoir of water that is literally right there. I mean, you've got water in the foreground, fire in the background, but as Craig said, most of the United States continues to be blanketed by drought conditions. The small amounts of rain we've seen over the last 2 weeks, not nearly enough to make up for one of the driest Aprils of all time. Now, as we kind of parse through some more of the information about this, the article that I particularly have been referring to, this is 12 News, again, our sister station in Arizona, and they really have honed in on one particular property. I mean, this is in the West Valley. It's nearly 1,000 acres, but they're talking about the Buckeye Equestrian and Event Center and how that has been impacted. The general manager said it's kind of miserable with the wind blowing and the smoke smell, and the property is home to 300 cows and steers, 50 horses, and several people staying in RVs on the site. So obviously that is something that is currently not under threat, because fire officials do say there's currently no threat to any people, animals, or structures, but that particular equestrian center is right sort of on the brink of where they can see that fire, and they are feeling the effects of some of the smoke, though they have not yet had the fire spread to where it is a threat, at least according to fire officials as of this morning. It's primarily burning on the bottom of a riverbed near State Route 85. Now, we don't know if this specifically is that area that's being referenced in this reporting, but is that water a riverbed? I suppose it's possible. Again, all we know is that that's Maricopa County. We don't know that that's the primary area of burning, but look, I think observation can tell us that it's likely. So we'll continue to see here. Now, the fire officials said that it was especially the wind on Sunday that made this difficult to contain. And again, as of 4 a.m. this morning, 0% contained, according to this reporting. And what you're going to get here now with this sort of zoom out of this shot is just a understanding of how far and wide the smoke is stretching from this brush fire. It is headed all the way out, as you can see how thick it is there at the base and how it just continues on up into the sky. And look, you can see buildings and structures in the area, but again, even off in the distance, there appears to be some various architecture, but fire officials as of 4 a.m. did not note any imminent threat to people or structures. So we'll see the containment. We don't see any firefighting work just from this shot, but we'll certainly go back to this if it continues to rage on during the stream and if we have time. Now, for now, we actually are going to take a break because very early here in our week, we are lucky enough to have an interview. Julia Ferrar from Virginia Tech is going to join us to talk about something very interesting that happened last week. A trio of interesting trademarks submitted by Taylor Swift that seemingly guard her likeness against AI use. Obviously, with the growth of AI, many different aspects of society are being impacted. That certainly includes the entertainment industry. And we're going to dive a little deeper into that when we get back from this commercial break. Okay, welcome back to Live Impact News here on this Monday morning, and we are going to be joined by a special guest here now. Early on in the week, we get to do an interview right off the bat about a very unique topic here. This is Julia Firar from Virginia Tech University, the head of digital literacy initiatives and associate professor at university libraries at Virginia Tech. Julia, I'm Connor. This is our first time meeting. It's always kind of fun when our first time meeting is live during an interview, but thank you for joining us. I hope you're having a good Monday so far.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Definitely. And, we appreciate you being here because all of the different ways in which artificial intelligence can be covered, it's almost too expansive to even wrap your arms around. And this gives us an opportunity to kind of focus in on something very specific that I do think speaks to the uncertain future that comes with AI in general. And so we know a little bit of background here before we dive into this. Taylor Swift filed 3 trademarks on Friday, 2 of which cover her voice, 2 separate phrases, "Hey, it's Taylor Swift" and "Hey, it's Taylor." That third trademark covers a picture of Swift that, if you are familiar with some of her touring, will be very sort of familiar to you. She's holding a pink guitar. She's on stage. And so 3 different trademarks. She's filed over 300 trademarks in general during her career, but these 3 specifically seem to point to protection from artificial intelligence. I'll just start very broad, Julia. When you see that these trademarks are filed by one of the biggest artists in the world, what's your sort of first impression of this move by Swift?
Sure. I think this is a really interesting moment. And this move by her makes me think about so many aspects of digital literacy that she's enacting herself, thinking about, what are her rights of her image in digital spaces? How does AI feature into that? How there have been lots of examples of her image used in the past for misinformation or as part of political campaigns, even. So she's at an interesting point to be making this move. And I'm really curious about how that will impact the conversation going forward for all of us as we think about how we want things to look with AI and the kinds of policy and protections we'll set up for that.
And can you give us an idea of what exactly she's protecting here? I mean, we said, tangibly, it's those 2 phrases and that 1 image. But what sort of protection is she providing herself in this situation?
Right. So I am not a legal expert, so I'll give that caveat. But in filing a trademark, she's protecting her brand essentially and her ability to make money off of her image and to enact that. It does not change that someone would still be able to create a deep fake of her with an AI tool. So technologically, that's not changing. This is her setting herself up for legal action when and if that happens again.
And you mentioned how, she has had issues with AI in the past, very specifically, just for a little bit more context for our viewers, during the 2024 election, at the time, presidential candidate, now President Donald Trump, shared an AI-generated image of Swift in kind of sort of pointing to an endorsement for himself. And that was, many people probably remember that, a major controversy at the time, which kind of speaks to even beyond maybe music being created by AI, celebrities' images and likenesses can be used sort of without their own consent in this type of situation. I'm wondering, when it comes to the entertainment industry and this artificial intelligence situation and digital literacy, you'd look at those 3 things combined. Are you able to pinpoint kind of what the biggest fear is for artists in this world, in this realm that we're talking about?
That's a great question. And I think there are a lot of layers to this, a lot that we can be thinking about. There's the aspect of just people having control of their image and having the right over being able to say, yes, this is something I said, this is something I didn't say, versus that fear of someone's going to be able to make it look like I said something that I didn't, which is a fear I think that we all can have and is a very real thing that's not just about entertainment and just about celebrities. That's a very human thing. So I think that's first most core thing. But then there is also the workforce element of this, that in entertainment specifically, we have people making their livelihood off of their image, their voice, thinking about voice actors, actors, folks for whom this has very real economic implications as well.
I want to ask, it's so interesting to think about just the concept of someone's own voice and then the sort of transfer towards who owns that voice. It's something that I never even would have considered. It seems so obvious. The person whose voice it is owns that voice. Obviously, that's sort of like a reductive way to look at it. But when it comes to your voice and what you own in terms of that voice, I mean, where does that world stand now? I'm surprised that trademarks even need to be filed. I would have thought that this would be something that was sort of understood and already woven into sort of the entertainment legal industrial complex, if you will.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And the nuances of that in terms of legal implications are not something that I can speak to at great length. But I do, in terms of digital literacy, have a general understanding that we are in lots of different places with this. Digital identity is a piece of digital literacy where we think about what kinds of images do I put out there about myself online? What do I share? What kinds of choices do I make? But then also what's outside of my control? What information is collected about me in terms of my personal data, my browser history, my activity on social media? And so those are kind of groupings of things that we might also think like, oh yeah, you should have complete control over that, right? Because those are things tied to you and what you're doing. But then the companies and the platforms that we're using do have control over that data and are able to collect that data about us. And a connected idea here is about a term called personality rights or rights of publicity. So the rights of an individual to control the use of their identity, then their name, their image, their likeness. And my understanding generally is that we have different state laws and different ways that's interpreted in the US right now. We have different things going around the world with that. And I think we're at a point where a lot of that is really murky right now as we're seeing changes in technology that kind of push against our understanding of that.
And in some ways, technology is moving faster than the judicial system can, right? And so there is definitely a Wild West type quality to this. I thought you mentioned something interesting, whereas different states have different laws in terms of how this breaks down. And maybe part of the reason that the trademark yourself trend has become slightly more popular with entertainment figures is because those trademarks can be filed in federal court. I know that gets back into the legalese of the whole thing, but that is something I saw as well to sort of add a little more context to your answer there. I'm wondering if you are a Taylor Swift fan and you are seeing this all happen and you're sitting at home and you're like, well, I want to make sure that the Taylor Swift songs that I hear and images that I see and messages that I see are actually from the artist that I love and not a computer somewhere or a bad actor with AI mechanisms. How can fans sort of help themselves be more literate about these new problems?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. The implications of this for truth and trust are huge. And especially when we have a celebrity that we follow, we want to know that the information we're following is the right and true information from them. Absolutely. Things that I would encourage people to think about are first pausing whenever they see something new or that sparks a really big reaction. Maybe you see an announcement from that purports to be from Taylor that she's got a new album dropping tomorrow. We pause and think, okay, does that make sense? What am I feeling about that? Why am I feeling? I'm recognizing those big emotions, so now I'm going to take a step back. Then we can think about what are the trusted sources that I can go to. Taylor Swift in particular is very active on Instagram and on social media. So if I go directly to her accounts, that's hopefully going to be a more authoritative source than wherever I might have seen this. So if I'm seeing it in a way that seems like it's directly from her, then I can also try to verify with other sources, opening up your browser of choice and seeing, is anybody reporting on this already? Where are their sources from? How can I kind of track this and trail this around from multiple things? The main idea that I want to give people is not just staying within a single thing that you're seeing. You may see a piece of media that's sparking that big reaction. It can be tempting to try to verify and zoom in and look really closely at that thing, but it's often going to be a faster and more productive thing to then go outside and find another source.
And, it's funny because as you go through these strategies for this particular situation, they very closely mirror the advice that we often give to viewers about more modern digital scams when it comes to text messages that are trying to get you to click on a certain link, or emails that come through. Very similar to what you described, where it's going to seem big and exciting at first and almost a too good to be true type of quality maybe to look out for. And so go and check other sources. And so that, it's interesting how those two things are sort of in a dance with each other, separate issues, but similar things to look out for. So that kind of struck me as interesting there. When it comes to sort of this AI within the entertainment industry, right? Because we know that AI is going to have so many impacts on our society, but just for the entertainment industry, is there anything you are looking out for in terms of what the next wave of this is? And this can be something that's positive to come, or again, something that people need to be aware of and look out for to come. Is there anything you see in the near future to look out for in terms of artificial intelligence impacting the entertainment industry?
That's a really interesting question. I think to me, the opportunity is to dig into the human questions that we might be able to see most clearly in entertainment, because that is something that we are, so many of us, invested in as a place to find enjoyment and fun. And when technology changes and legislation changes, then add some doom and gloom to that fun. I think that's a place that we feel that as humans, but that's an opportunity to think more broadly about some of these digital literacy questions that come up in so many places, where we're thinking about, what are the ethics of being a person online? What are my rights and responsibilities as an individual? How am I going to verify my information? So I think entertainment is a place that we can see that really clearly and feel that coming back to those emotions. But I think the opportunity is to come back to this bigger sense of, really, what do we want from our digital lives and how do we want to enact that?
My last question for you, and again, this kind of dives a little bit into the legal side of things, but when it comes to somebody who's looking at this and they're saying that, well, one of my favorite things to do is to create funny, wholesome, perfectly innocent sort of AI generated images of Taylor Swift and send them to my Taylor Swift group chat. And we all get a laugh out of it, and so on and so forth. Those little sort of more personal uses of AI that people are discovering that enrich their lives a little bit. If they're seeing something like this and they're suddenly worried about how they're interacting with their artificial intelligence and how it could impact the greater world and the artists that they maybe love and the friends that they're sending it to, do you have any advice for people in that situation as they sort of try to approach this new world? I know that's kind of a weird question, but it is the most personally anecdotable sort of use of AI that I experience on a day-to-day basis.
Right, right. It's a good question, and that does make it tangible. I think a conversation that I have with students at Virginia Tech around digital literacy is that, as much as we would like to see these things as it's just a tool, it's just a neutral thing, there are these broader implications for misinformation. What if that image gets shared outside of your group chat? What happens then if it goes beyond the control that you thought you might have had? when we put things out there, they often spin out like that. What are the implications of the energy expenditures of the AI tool that you're using? That's an ethical implication that I talk about with students a lot. So it's tough because we want to find these pockets of joy and happiness and connection with other people. We want to use digital tools to do that. I hope that digital literacy can empower people to do that. But that also isn't a neutral act in itself, and it can have these other real world implications. So I think just being mindful about all of that, and as much as we can, making decisions that take those pieces into account, and having that awareness of how things can push beyond maybe your initial intention for them.
Absolutely. And, Julia, first of all, we really appreciate your time. We've already taken too much of it here. Is there anything else you want to add before we let you go? And I think maybe I would love to talk to you one day about how how your students are approaching this, what kind of questions they have for you. We're short on time today, but that is something I'd love to be able to talk to you about at some point. Until then, is there anything else you want to add about this new news featuring Taylor Swift, these trademarks, and the entertainment industry with AI?
Yeah, I'd love to come back to what you were pointing out earlier, that the practices that we use to verify information also apply to not getting scammed, also apply to, you're doing some research to make a decision. Many of these practices apply to all areas of our lives. So taking the time to practice and get used to thinking in this way, it's not going to have just one small effect. It's going to be something you use in lots of different places. So I think you were right on to point out that there are connections here to lots of different areas that we can apply them to.
Absolutely. And hopefully that's something that can become as commonplace as any other safety practice, is people sort of even being able to drill down on these things, really learn how to spot all of these various tells that something is not real as we get into a world that is increasingly easier to make things seem fake. So, Julia, I really appreciate you coming on. This has been great. Thanks for taking the time, and hopefully you have a great rest of your week.
Oh, you too. Thanks for having me.
That's Julia Firar from Virginia Tech University, with a more insight and more understanding of what we're dealing with here in terms of modern digital literacy, and maybe why we see an artist like Taylor Swift taking time to create trademarks of her likeness. So this is a topic that you surely will be hearing plenty more about in the years and decades to come, as artificial intelligence continues to be an increasingly significant part of just about every aspect of society. Now, we're going to take another commercial break here. When we get back, we do have a live event that is up and running that we want to make sure that we visit in on. It's the Acting Attorney General, Todd Blanche, and Agriculture Secretary Rollins having a news conference on antitrust investigations. We're going to get to that right when we get back. It revolves the meatpacking industry, and that's something we've heard a little bit about already in Live Impact News in the past few weeks. So we'll get to that right when we return. Okay, welcome back to Live Impact News. Sorry for the extended break there. We were getting this press conference all set to go. This is going to be, again, the Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche in the news last week after that new indictment was brought against James Comey. This time back in the news, but for a press conference that is happening live right now. It's in action right now, but we actually want to play it from the beginning so that there's more context and understanding of what's being discussed. Let's hear from Todd Blanche as we speak.
All right, good morning, everybody. Today we are here to talk about our progress here at the Justice Department to hold meat packers accountable. As you all know, last November, the President tasked the department to investigate the costs and prices of beef. As a result, we prioritized investigating potential antitrust violations in U.S. cattle and beef markets. In the beef industry, the big four processors control over 85% of the beef processing market. Two of the big four are primarily foreign-owned. Multiple plant closures across the country, the current market structure, and high concentration in the industry indicate anti-competitive activity. Since the President's executive order, the department has been actively investigating with a review of over 3 million documents. Hundreds of industry participants, including ranchers, cattlemen, producers, and processors, have been contacted and many interviewed as part of this ongoing investigation. More broadly, the department has also executed on the President's executive order to stop anti-competitive behavior in the broader food supply market. Later this week, we will be announcing an historic settlement that will directly affect the prices of proteins like chicken, pork, and turkey. This business model allows competitors to exchange competitively sensitive information on every aspect of the protein industry and has raised the prices on chicken, raised the prices on pork, and raised the prices on turkey. The department is also working closely with Secretary Rollins and the Department of Agriculture. We've signed a memorandum of understanding that allows us to share information aimed at protecting competition in agricultural inputs like seeds and fertilizer. But there is more work to do, and we need your help. I want to remind everyone and anyone in the industry that if you have information about antitrust crimes, about price fixing, bid rigging, market allocation, or even procurement fraud, the Department of Justice wants to hear from you. Through our Whistleblower Rewards program, which we do in partnership with the United States Postal Inspection Service, you can be financially rewarded for coming forward with information about this behavior. Just to put a fine point on it, if the information you provide helps us secure a criminal penalty in excess of $1 million, you can be entitled to recover and receive 15 to 30% of the money that we recover. So whether you're a farmer, a purchaser, a processor, you can help protect food security in America by reporting these types of violations and potentially criminal conduct. We will use every law enforcement tool available to help reduce food prices and vigorously enforce the antitrust laws to ensure every aspect of the agricultural industry competes on a fair playing field. Now I would like to to introduce our great Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary Brooke Rollins.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and a very hearty and vigorous thank you to our Acting Attorney General. He's only been on the job for, I think, a couple of weeks at this point, and the moment I called and asked for his time and his focus and his team's effort on this issue facing our country, without hesitation, Todd, you said we're all in at the Department of Justice. And so here we are today and just couldn't be more grateful. I've got a couple of larger comments to put this in context, then I know my great partner, Director Peter Navarro from the White House, we've worked together a long time, has some thoughts. And then really the stars of the show are our ranchers who are here from Colorado, from Texas, from the West, from Idaho, and they'll have a couple of thoughts too. And then I think we'll take a couple questions at the end. Again, what an honor it is to be here alongside Attorney General Blanche. Thank you for your strong leadership, and of course, the incredible Peter Navarro, our Director of Trade and Manufacturing Policy, also joined by several members of the ranching community. Todd, Peter, and I each serve the American public in different capacities across the executive branch at the pleasure of our boss, President Donald Trump. But we are united by a single mission: to protect our great American farmers and ranchers, the American way of life, and the American consumer. President Trump has been the greatest champion in American history for our farmers and ranchers, from record-breaking investments in rural America through the Working Families Tax Cuts to opening up the global market, now 18 new trade deals for our incredible American ag products, and to most recently implementing a plan to fortify the American beef industry. And these efforts couldn't be more timely for America's ranchers, who are seeing a historic low herd size. This morning, I'll talk a little bit about and summarize that herd size crisis facing our ranchers, but how the ongoing investigation into our Big Four packers, what that means for the larger policy context, and certainly what it means for national security. Let's begin with the herd size. As of January 1st of this year, we have about 86.2 million head of cattle and calves in America. That is the lowest since the 1950s, and this year we're looking to be slightly down again. In the past decade alone, we've lost over 17% of our cattle ranchers. More than 100,000 ranches across this country are no more. The low herd size inherited by the Trump administration can be attributed to a variety of factors. The biggest one, at least from our perspective, is the radical left's ongoing assault against ranching as a way of life. For years, they used climate alarmism to wage a war on cattle in America. And when you pair that with droughts, wildfire, overregulation from previous administrations, and volatile markets, this is how we have ended up here today. Growing the herd size is an immediate problem in need of solutions, and we've already begun implementing across the government and into the states how we're going to solve for that. And we'll talk more about that as we move through the week. But already on the grazing allotments, we've opened up millions of acres in the West. We unveiled our new product of the USA, which is catching like fire across the country in a good way, labeling meat and poultry and egg products as the actually born, raised, harvested, and processed in America, which is a new rule. Expanding the grading pilot program to include 88 facilities in 32 states. That's smaller processors. Reducing holiday and overtime inspection fees for small processors. Of course, encouraging our child nutrition programs. You all have heard me say over and over, USDA spends $400 million every day on 16 nutrition programs, incentivizing those programs to purchase locally grown, processed, harvested beef. And then, of course, Bobby Kennedy and I, with our new dietary guidelines, underscoring the importance of meat, among other actions, in eating real food. So we are making big change to keep incentivizing the growth of our cattle herd and to get out of this current situation we're in. However, and this is the second part of what I want to talk about today, the consolidation in U.S. meatpacking has led to just 4 meat packers: JBS, a Brazilian-owned company, Cargill, Tyson Foods, and National Beef, another Brazilian company. Those 4 companies monopolize about 85% of the U.S. processing market today. But it hasn't always been that way. The rate of this 4-firm control has accelerated since the 1970s. According to USDA data, concentration for cattle slaughter of these 4 was only 25% in 1977 and jumped to 71% by 1992. As mentioned today, it is an astounding 85%. Notably, these 4 firms now own together more than 70 subsidiary companies today. They don't own them together, but in total, there are 70 subsidiary companies that are owned by these 4. This has led to a frightening landscape for cattle ranchers. Industry consolidation reduces options for our ranchers looking to sell their cattle. It weakens their negotiating power, and it risks reliance upon a single buyer. Today, the concentration of larger plants opens the door to tighter coordination by the Big Four with producers and perhaps the exertion of control over them as well, given they have limited options to sell their cattle. As ranchers face fewer options for selling their animals, the Big Four grow stronger and stronger. These companies now have an unprecedented ability to wield market power and influence prices paid for cattle, definitely more so than if we had greater competition. On top of that, half of these meatpacking giants, including the largest meat packer in the world, are either foreign-owned or have significant foreign ownership and control, making them a threat not just to our cattle producers, but a threat to America itself. And as time has gone on, it becomes more and more clear that food security is truly national security. One Brazilian-owned company holds roughly a quarter of the market and has a documented history of international corruption and illicit activity. The brutal reality is that such foreign ownership of meat packers has been affiliated not just with corruption, but also cartels and, as recent as last week, slave labor, which is bad enough on its own, but it's also to the detriment of America's great independent ranchers and consumers. Further, when just 4 firms control a market, suppliers and food prices are rocked heavily when disruptions occur. The last few years have proven that the protein sector especially, and therefore our food security, is especially at risk when global pandemics, animal disease outbreaks, and facility issues like fires, labor disputes, foodborne illnesses, and cybersecurity attacks occur. As an example, in 2019, a fire at a Tyson slaughter plant in Kansas resulted in a 27% drop in cattle traded on the market just that following week. And in 2021, a cyber attack on JBS plants in the U.S. caused ripple effects and delayed production. President Trump is acutely aware of these challenges, as evidenced by his Truth Social directive last November, directing the Department of Justice to investigate the Big Four meat packers for potential collusion and price manipulation. Ensuring these practices do not happen will protect both producers and consumers. This also builds on our September 2025 Memorandum of Understanding with the Department of Justice Antitrust Division to identify anti-competitive behaviors with respect to agricultural inputs, as such consolidation isn't just limited to meat packing, even though that's what we're talking about today. But whether it's seeds and fertilizer and other inputs, the consolidation of agriculture in America has continued unabated for decades, and it is now time to take a very hard look and begin onshoring and reshoring, as the president has so eloquently stated, so much of what we do and produce in America. Just last week, a lot of you were at our press conference on fertilizer, where we certainly underscored the need to do that.
Well, you heard fertilizer mentioned there right at the very end of that press conference, the bulk of that press conference, about some regulations that may come in certain industries as far as the monopolizing of some of those food industries that you heard spoken about there. But however, fertilizer did get mentioned there. Fertilizer, one of those resources that has come under major scrutiny due to the closing of the Strait of Hormuz because of the war in Iran. So fertilizer prices expected to go up, fertilizer supply not flowing nearly as readily as it did before the Strait of Hormuz was closed. It's not just oil that goes through that strait. So interested to see if any more comes on that front, as well as on the main sort of mission statement of that press conference, which was that antitrust legislation. Now, we're going to take a commercial break here. When we get back, now that we have a foundation for what's being discussed, we may be able to go to that press conference live and in action right now. Secretary Rollins still speaking right now, but first, a quick commercial break for us. Welcome back to Live Impact News. We are still live in studio. There are currently 2 different live events that are happening right now that we're keeping an eye on. Of course, Todd Blanche continuing in his press conference about antitrust violations in the meatpacking industry. And then we also have at the bottom of your screen Secretary Pete Hegseth and the governor of West Virginia, among others, presenting Purple Hearts to National Guardsmen who were involved in the November shooting in D.C., in Washington, D.C. We'd like to visit with both of these events. I think because we were doing, well, let's bring Sarah in here. Let's bring Sarah in so we can sort of discuss. Sarah, we already were on the press conference regarding antitrust. Do we stay with that since we're on theme, or do we dip into the Purple Heart presentation and do a little variety here? What do you like?
I think we should go to the Purple Heart ceremony.
Okay, let's take a listen as those Purple Hearts are presented to National Guardsmen involved in last November's shooting in Washington, D.C. Here it is.
And our leaders. May God bless West Virginia, our National Guard, and may God bless America. And as you hear me say often, press on, boys.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Governor of the State of West Virginia, Governor Patrick Morrisey.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's so wonderful to be here today and to see so many familiar faces, and especially see Andrew here today. I know I saw you in some different circumstances, but you're doing great. And I want to make sure that as we're commemorating the wonderful, brave men who stepped up to protect their lives, we're recognizing Andrew and Sarah as well. And Evalie, it's wonderful to see you, and Melody and Jason. Thank you so much. This is an incredible day. Secretary Hegseth, thank you. This means a lot, not only to the brave men who stepped forward on that day, but for you recognizing what their service meant to our country and to West Virginia. All West Virginians are so deeply thankful for what you did. Words can't describe it. I know that on that day, I had a chance to watch and learn a little bit of the bravery that you demonstrated. And I remember speaking with General Seward and talking about that extensively. The state of West Virginia owes a deep debt of gratitude for your courage and your instinct under fire. And that's why I was so excited to come here today. The medals that you're receiving today, they demonstrate extraordinary heroism, but not just in combat. They demonstrate that heroism when instinct and character take over, when you run to the fire and you put your own life on the line to help one of your colleagues. That's incredible. And I really can speak for the people of the state of West Virginia who are so appreciative of everything you do. When there are no scripts, and the cost is potentially your own life, that decision means everything. Major Edwin Stanfield, Major Ryan Reynolds, we are grateful as a state for what you're doing. You've served our country with amazing distinction, including deployments across the world, and you are the very definition of courage. Sergeant Andrew Wolf and Sarah Beckstrom, these were 2 individuals that were going about doing their business for a very fine, a mighty mission. They're very popular among their colleagues, and I can tell you that their service will never be forgotten. We always pray for the memory of Sarah, and we're so grateful to see you, Andrew. I love seeing your smile and talking to you as you've been getting better and better. We lost Sarah, and our heart's going to remain with her always, but we're going to continue to keep her in our prayers. You know, when I think about being here today, and I think about the bravery that you 2 gentlemen displayed, I have to believe that while your upbringing was incredible, perhaps there's that little bit of West Virginia fortitude that came to you that day. Because West Virginia has so many incredible patriots who volunteer for our state, and we're known for that over a very prolonged period of time. One of the highest military enlistment rates in the nation. And perhaps a little bit of that West Virginia calling came to you that day. I am so grateful to be here, and I want to thank everyone who supports the men and women in the Guard and in our armed services. Because service is never served alone. I know that from
Okay, obviously some audio issues there at the moment. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give a little bit of background on the event for which those Purple Hearts are being awarded, and then we'll check back in and hope that they've kind of fixed their audio issues. So where did this come from? Why are these National Guardsmen getting Purple Hearts? Many of you will likely remember this story from November. This is in regards to two West Virginia National Guard members. That's why you're hearing from the governor of West Virginia. This was 20-year-old Army Specialist Sarah Beckstrom and 24-year-old Air Force Staff Sergeant Andrew Wolf, who were shot while on patrol in Washington, D.C. on November 26th, 2025. Now, Beckstrom passed away from her injuries the following day. Both soldiers were serving in D.C. under President Trump's executive order aimed at boosting security in the city. So you likely remember this event. We covered it here on Live Impact News, actually. I'm just making sure that I have this ceremony is taking place at Pentagon's Hall of Heroes. That's a space dedicated to honoring members of the U.S. military who have received the Medal of Honor. This is our country's highest award for valor. So those two National Guardsmen both receiving that, and Sarah Beckstrom receiving that honor posthumously. So this will be presented by the governor, and as you can see, Pete Hegseth has actually taken the podium here at this press conference. So let's listen in once again, see if those audio issues have corrected themselves.
She's not forgotten any day, and it is her memory that stiffens our resolve each and every day. So thank you for being here. Thank you for, from that night to today, the courage you've shown, the strength you've shown, and the support you've shown throughout the force, which means an incredible amount. And then Andy, one day I'm looking down at him in a hospital bed. The next day I'm looking up, he's throwing out the first pitch. An incredible human being, truly a miracle. You have a Melody, you have a praying mother. And an incredible father. Melody and Jason, it's good to see you both and your family. Just from that bedside and those prayers and more prayers and more prayers to the miracle of today. What an honor it is to see you again, be with you again. So many great things in front of you. And again, it's the moments that day that are the reason we're here. A wounded American, a lost American, yet the display of heroism. So before I continue, I do want to, in memory of Specialist Sarah Beckstrom, like to do a moment of silent prayer, if you would. And amen. You mentioned a story as old as the scriptures. When the people of Keilah were under attack by the Philistine army, their harvest being stolen from them, the people living in fear, the Lord said to David, "Save Keilah." David and his men were wary, and he asked the Lord what he should do. And the Lord said, "Arise, and I will hand the Philistines to you." So David and his men answered the call, and they went. They fought the Philistines, wounded and killed them, and saved the people of Keilah. These heroes before us today, they're also part of the story that played out on our rugged frontier. When the citizens of Dodge City, Kansas, were being terrorized, pillaged, and shot by marauders, a tough 30-year-old frontier marshal named Earp answered the call. He chased the attackers out of town and during a midnight pursuit across the Arkansas River, downed the ringleader. There's a line about those days in the West that says, you cannot submit to evil without allowing evil to grow. Each time the good are defeated, or each time they yield, they only cause the forces of evil to grow stronger. These heroes before us today, they're part of the story that unfolded 47 years ago in a place called Tehran. The 52 American hostages taken by Iranian terrorists for 444 days. When their captors demanded they denounce America, they refused. In defiance, one American wrote on the wall of his cell, "Long live the red, white, and blue." And so, the two heroes before us today, their particular story culminates on the corner of 17th and I Streets in our nation's capital. A city that when the guardsmen were deployed wasn't so different from that place in the Old Testament, or the American frontier, or Tehran. Lawless streets racked by gangs and bloodthirsty criminals. These guardsmen, then and today, made our capital safe. So on a tranquil day, the day before Thanksgiving, there stood these two Americans, but these two here, guarding our nation. After service in the Middle East, Afghanistan, and on the border with Mexico, their dedication to and love for this country brought them here to this city, our nation's capital, to protect American citizens. It was a criminal alien terrorist bent on murder and destruction that had journeyed to our capital. He raised a stolen gun against our National Guardsmen. A brave soldier and a brave airman, both born in Maryland but forged, as was mentioned, I think there's a lot of West Virginia in there. Forged in West Virginia, they pushed forward. They neutralized the threat. They moved civilians to safety. So you see, these heroes are part of humanity's oldest story. Good versus evil. Courage versus cowardice. Fight versus flight. They chose good that day. And we know what side this soldier and airman are on, the side of the United States of America, the red, white, and blue. Major Reynolds and Stanfield, you are the essence of what General Patton called, quote, the real hero, the warrior who never lets his fear of death overpower his honor, his sense of duty to his country, and his innate manhood. Congratulations. Thank you for your courage that day. Thank you for your service to this nation. Thank you for the example that it sets to the country and to the world. When in that moment, you could have made a number of different choices. I watched the tape. Everybody else watched the tape. An impossible situation, almost unforeseen, unfolding in a matter of seconds. Yes, there's training. Yes, there's instinct. There's a lot of things. But ultimately, there's a choice. And you chose action. You chose courage over fear. You chose to put your body in that, at risk on behalf of other human beings, on behalf of their families, on behalf of the rest of your unit. That is a choice we need to celebrate. That is an action we need to honor. That's why today we want to recognize you before the nation and ensure the nation understands that these are the types of Americans we should be celebrating and emulating. The types of people I want my kids looking up to and knowing your name, not the names of celebrities or TV hosts, but the names of heroes, the names of men who put it all on the line when it mattered the most. And so we thank God for you. We thank God for the lives you saved. We thank God for the lives you protected. And we thank God for your lives and all that God weaved into your life to bring you to that moment, writing a more beautiful story than we could have ever conceived of. So God bless you. And how about we pin some medals on these guys? Thank you.
Would Major Reynolds and Major Stanfield please join Secretary Hegseth on stage? Major Reynolds, please step forward. The President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress 2 July 1926, has awarded the Soldier's Medal to Major Ryan S. Reynolds, West Virginia National Guard, for heroism not involving actual conflict with an enemy on 26 November 2025 during a targeted shooting attack on National Guard personnel in Washington, D.C. Major Ryan Reynolds advanced towards active gunfire to assist wounded service members. Without regard for personal safety, he subdued the attacker, allowing first responders to render life-saving aid, protect civilians, and assist responding law enforcement personnel while under threat of his life. Major Reynolds' courageous actions directly contributed to saving lives and preventing additional casualties. His heroism is in keeping with the finest traditions of military service and reflects great credit upon himself, the West Virginia National Guard, and the United States Army.
Okay, welcome back into the studio here on Live Impact News as those individuals continue to receive those high honors from Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth and the Governor of West Virginia. Now, let's very briefly, this case that we're discussing, we just told you what happened. We're going to dive very, very briefly into the background of this. This is Rahmanullah Lakanwal, 29 years old, an Afghan national who resided in Bellingham, Washington. He's the individual who has been charged in the crimes that resulted in the injuries and subsequent death for one of these service members. Now, according to court documents, Lockenwall allegedly drove his Toyota Prius from Bellingham, Washington to Washington, D.C. while in possession of a stolen firearm. On Wednesday, November 26, Lockenwall opened fire without provocation at 17th and I Streets Northwest, shooting Beckstrom and Wolf in the head. Again, Beckstrom later would pass away from her injuries. Those were two majors in the National Guard who were and there were also two majors in the National Guard who were nearby and subdued the subject. And this is coming from justice.gov, the Justice Department website. At the scene, Miss Beckstrom, 20, would succumb to her injuries a few days later, and National Guardsman Andrew Wolf was critically injured in the ambush. The case being investigated by the FBI's Washington Field Office and Metropolitan Police Department. So just an update, a reminder of that case. This particular article, again, justice.gov from Tuesday, December 23rd, 2025. And so that is the case. That was the result, and now today you see honors for those who were involved in this particular case. So let's now go to a commercial break as we come out of that here on Live Impact. When we come back, about 30 minutes left in the show. Another live event has just begun, and we've got some more headlines we want to get to. That is coming up next. Okay, hello again, and welcome back to Live Impact News. We're going to carry on with our live events. The Purple Heart awarding ceremony has ended. Attorney General Todd Blanche press conference about antitrust in the meatpacking industry has ended. So instead, we are now going to go live out to a courthouse where, as we speak, Meta is on trial for being a public nuisance. This is happening in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Meta, of course, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram. And let's give a small amount of background on what is happening here. Meta faces a New Mexico trial that could force changes to Facebook and other platforms. This is according to Reuters.com. New Mexico, the state, is seeking billions in damages and changes to the platform to protect minors. Meta argues that changes aren't possible, and this may force their withdrawal from the state. This trial started today, and it could prompt a judge to order those changes to Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp as well. And again, there has been a warning from Meta that this could force it to withdraw from the state. The case stems from a lawsuit filed by New Mexico Attorney General Raul Torres, a Democrat, accusing the social media giant of designing its products to addict young users and failing to protect children from sexual exploitation on its platforms. This has been an issue that has been in the news in prevalence for some time now. Meta on trial in New Mexico. Let's go live out to the courthouse.
Infinite scroll, connecting unconnected minors with youth in New Mexico. It is a more specific focus than what Meta will argue. Who's going to testify about public nuisance? Well, there's going to be a number of witnesses here, Your Honor. A number of witnesses, of fact witnesses. Clarie Miller is the lead suicide prevention coordinator with the Department of Health. She provides statewide trainings to youth regarding suicide prevention. You're going to hear from her in a few minutes. She is going to testify about how her trainings address social media because of what she has heard from teens about the link between social media and suicide. Commander John Talley, his testimony again will talk about the effects of C-SEC and sextortion, not only on the under 18 victims, on the children, but on their families and on the community at large. Gregory Frostad, who I think you will hear from later this week, is the Assistant Secretary of Policy and Technology with the Public Education Department. He will testify as to his observations as to what's going on in the schools on a statewide level. And during phase one, Your Honor, you heard from 3 or 4 school administrators, each of which described what was going on in their school. Mr. Frostad's testimony confirms it's not simply limited to Vado Elementary School or to Ms. Salazar's school outside of Albuquerque, but that it is a statewide problem. That brings us to the expert witnesses, Your Honor. There are 5 who will testify. Some of them this week. Unfortunately, I don't have that schedule with me. So one of them is Dr. O'Brien. The court heard from Dr. O'Brien again in phase one briefly. She will be back. She is the director of the Pivot Research Lab at the University of Texas in Arlington and will provide more fulsome testimony regarding that concept of technology-facilitated sexual abuse and the extent to which it occurs in New Mexico. Dr. Jean Twenge is a professor of psychology at San Diego State University. And she is going to testify as to the relationship between social media use and mental health among adolescents. And specifically, she has a series of things called time series studies, which hopefully my partner, Mr. Migliore, will get her to explain to the court because it's above my head. But these time series studies strongly support social media as a key contributor to increases in adolescent depression, unhappiness, loneliness, self-harm, and suicide. And what Dr. Twenge says is there's no other factor out there that is as consistent as social media in contributing to those harms. And those are the harms that are at the heart of the public nuisance here in New Mexico. Dylan Pell is a mental health epidemiologist at the Department of Health. I've got him on the expert witness slide. He's both a fact and expert witness, Your Honor. But he will confirm, based on his observations, based on his research, that there is a mental health crisis, not only nationally, but right here in New Mexico among youth. And that social media, including and especially Facebook and Instagram, are a significant contributing factor to the mental health and safety of youth in New Mexico. And that is what is required for a public nuisance. Dr. Zachary Ward will return. He again gave brief testimony in phase 1 about numbers. We're going to go into a lot more detail this time. He will be here later this week, but he will testify based upon his review of the literature and New Mexico's specific data that social media use is a significant contributing factor in adverse mental health outcomes among youth. And one more witness from phase 1 coming back again, Your Honor, Dr. Timothy Kane, the psychiatrist at the University of New Mexico. She'll be here next week. She will provide additional testimony regarding the children that she counsels in her practice, the effects of social media on their mental health. She's also going to opine not only as to the role of social media associated with youth harms, but also what treatments are necessary to remedy the problem. So, Your Honor, before we move on to abatement, I want to discuss the issue of other risk factors, because we expect that Meta will point the finger everywhere. It's the state's fault. It's another platform's fault. It's the criminals. It's the parents. It's everybody's fault but Meta. First of all, no one else has been found to have committed 75,000 violations of the Unfair Practices Act. But putting that aside, the statute and the restatement both provide that joint and several liability would be appropriate here. If you look at Section 41-3A-1, joint and several liability applies to situations having a sound basis in public policy, given the number of Unfair Practices Act violations that the jury has found. We submit there is a sound basis in public policy to impose that type of liability in this case. Further, the burden is on Meta to establish that the nuisance can be apportioned and what percentage is attributable to Meta. And that is in the restatement, Section 433B, which says where there are 2 or more actors and one or more of the actors seeks to limit his liability on the ground that the harm is capable of apportionment, the burden of proof as to the apportionment is upon each such actor. So it's Meta who has to establish to you that the nuisance that its conduct, its violations caused, can be apportioned. And that brings us to our final topic today, Your Honor, which is abatement. And abatement, again, is one of the most important reasons that we're here. Because across New Mexico, across the country, children are begging for help. You will hear testimony that confirms there is a mental health crisis and that it is fueled and caused by social media. And we need to fix it. The court has broad and flexible powers to do so. Section 38.8 confirms that the state may bring an action in order to abate a public nuisance. It has been the law in in New Mexico since at least 1930 that courts of equity have power to give relief against either public or private nuisances by compelling the abatement or restraining the continuance of the nuisance. Your Honor, we thought this juxtaposition was interesting because more than 100 years ago, the New Mexico Supreme Court said the person responsible for a nuisance may be held liable for the expense of removing or abating it.
Okay, welcome back to Live Impact News. That trial well underway. As you can see, the back and forth, the presentations of arguments has already begun. For us, we're going to take a commercial break here. When we get back, we will be discussing an update that just came across the Associated Press about a ruling from the Supreme Court regarding abortion medication. That's up next. Okay, we're back here this Monday with a live reaction here to a story that just dropped. 10:55 a.m. is when this officially made its way onto the Associated Press website. It's apnews.com, and so we're going to go ahead and bring it to Live Impact News here. This is a Supreme Court ruling from today that restored broad access to the abortion pill mifepristone. This blocks a ruling that had threatened to upend one of the primary ways that abortion is provided here in the United States. The order was signed by Justice Samuel Alito, and it temporarily allows women seeking abortions to obtain that pill, mifepristone, at pharmacies or through the mail without an in-person visit to a doctor. Those rules had already been in effect for some time, but recently a federal appeals court imposed new restrictions. That happened last week. The Supreme Court decision comes this Monday. Some context here, some foundational information. The majority of abortions in the United States are obtained through medications. It's usually a combination of mifepristone and a second drug here. Their availability has blunted the impact of abortion bans that most Republican-led states have started enforcing since that 2022 Supreme Court ruling that overturned Roe v. Wade and allowed for state bans. So again, those state bans were allowed after Roe v. Wade was overturned in 2022. The availability of this medication, mifepristone, along with a second drug, has sort of made that impact a little softer here. Those abortion bans, the impact has been a little lessened by the fact that the majority of abortions in the United States are obtained through medications. And now this Supreme Court ruling allows for those medications to be obtained still through the mail or at pharmacies without an in-person visit to a doctor. Now, this started with Louisiana suing to restrict access to mifepristone, saying that its availability had undermined their own abortion ban. Some Democratic-led states have laws that seek to give legal protection to those who prescribe the drugs via telehealth to patients in states with abortion bans. So as you can see, this ruling working in concert with the reaction to the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Roe v. Wade is overturned. States can now put in place abortion bans. And so then you see the market and the sort of society at large reacting to that. There's a decision, a reaction, a decision, a reaction. This is what we see here as abortion continues to be an issue that is widely deliberated here, as we can see from this particular story, with the Supreme Court being heavily involved over the course of the last half decade. So this order will remain in effect for another week while both sides respond and the court more fully considers the issue. So this Supreme Court ruling is temporary, as there's more considerations to come. But for now, mifepristone is available in pharmacies and through the mail without a visit to a doctor. So that is the update for today that we wanted to make sure we had time to include here on Live Impact News. Now, what I would like to do, Sarah, is I am very briefly also going to do an update on the war in Iran, and then we can make our way to another break, and then we may go back live out to this trial, as it was really getting going when we left it. But let's do an update here. We have a Monday effort from U.S. forces announced by President Donald Trump to guide commercial ships through the Strait of Hormuz. There have been hundreds of commercial ships stuck since the war in Iran began, stuck in the Strait of Hormuz after Iran took control of that strait following the start of the war. Now, 2 American-flagged merchant ships have, quote, successfully transited through the critical waterway, according to the United States military. Now, the United States military also denied claims from Iran that Iran had struck an American Navy vessel southeast of the strait. In the meantime, Iran handed over its latest proposal for peace with the United States to mediators in Pakistan. Iran's state-run news agency reported that particular piece of information. Trump said he's not satisfied with it, but did not elaborate on what parts of the proposal he's not satisfied with. The ceasefire is now in its 4th week, and as you can tell, it remains shaky. But if we've had 4 weeks of a shaky ceasefire, then at least it's a shaky ceasefire that has so far been, permanent, at least for the time being, right? Okay, so we also have a situation that we talked about last week where Trump has claimed that the war has been, quote, terminated. The U.S. president also called the War Powers Resolution, which states that Congress must declare war or authorize the use of force within 60 days, quote, unconstitutional. Those 60 days is a critical timeline because the declaration from the Trump administration that the war had been terminated came right around that 60-day mark, which would mean that if the war is terminated, they would not need to go to Congress for approval of the continuance of the war. With the ceasefire in place, Trump has said that the war is in fact terminated. That's where things stand right now. A brief but necessary update on the war in Iran. Now we're going to take another break here. When we get back, let's go live back out to the courtroom as Meta's trial continues in New Mexico. Okay, welcome back. Let's go straight back to New Mexico. Meta on trial for being a public nuisance. That trial began today, and it is happening right now.
Proceeding. Here are the highlights. The devil is in the details, including things like the New Mexico Department of Justice wanting researchers to scrape individual user data, to scrape it. What that has to do with child safety and what it doesn't have to do with Cambridge Analytica is beyond me, but that's what they're asking Your Honor to do in the specific. Again, the common thread on all of these is that the state is asking you to make a series of the most far-reaching judicial decisions on these issues ever. The jury has already awarded $375 million against Meta. That additional piling on is not necessary, and it is an invitation to stretch the law beyond what it can tolerate. So the first question for Your Honor is public nuisance. The New Mexico Supreme Court defines a public nuisance as an unreasonable interference with a right common to the general public. And I want to start here because before we get to the elements, I want to define what a public nuisance is. And again, its essence is the public right nature of this, a shared resource that all people in the community enjoy. Those rights include things like access to air and water and public rights of way. The restatement gives the example of a beach or a navigable stream. But what public nuisance law does not tolerate is the aggregation of individual claims, even 75,000 of them, to amount to some kind of public right in what? In healthcare and access to 501c3 hospitals? There's no law for it. And in fact, the New Mexico Court of Appeals, every time it has gotten a case like this, has said no. It is not an aggregation of individual personal injury claims. The first thing you have to do is identify the public right, the shared communal resource that has been threatened. That is the essence of this tort. So from this body of law, the parties agree that there are three elements to a nuisance claim. They're right here on the board. And I'll talk about the first and why the state can't carry its burden as to any of them. We'll start with the first element, a public right. The restatement is worth pausing on, both because it is so clear that this is the essence of a public nuisance and because it's what the Village of Los Ranchos case that the Supreme Court decided relied upon. The state knows this is the law. So without telling Your Honor any details in the opening, it's trying to fashion itself a public right that no other court has recognized. And what it comes to, I think, from its papers, although it's flimsy, is some kind of public right in access to healthcare systems or to an unbusy doctor's office. And I want to pause on another part of the restatement because it's already addressed that exact scenario. The restatement third on liability says that those kinds of theories have been universally rejected. Why? Because the way that you address them is through personal injury claims, and look at the last line, through legislation. That is what courts up and down the country have said again and again. These are just some examples of state Supreme Court cases that we could fit on this screen. And I want to focus on Missouri specifically because, as Your Honor knows, New Mexico derives its statutory law from the 1846 Carney Code. And what Missouri said is that this exact theory is a private tort. It is an aggregation of those claims. It is not a public nuisance. That's from the Missouri Supreme Court. Every single Supreme Court to address this issue has said no. And again, these are just examples we can fit on the screen. Others include Ohio in the opioids case, Connecticut, New Jersey, the list goes on and on. Now, we do not dispute, I will not dispute, that some teens in New Mexico suffer mental health harm, and that is devastating. It really is, and it's personal, to be honest. And we also don't dispute that many of those teens use social media, including Meta's platforms.
Okay, welcome back into the Live Impact Studio. This is a very intriguing trial to listen in on as the attorneys discuss the implications and the consequences of some of the different things that the different ways Meta has conducted themselves, or at least are presenting it in such a way. So that's a trial we'll keep an eye on. That started today. We're wondering how far along that will go. We'll try to cover that as it goes. Hopefully we'll get a lot more time live in that courtroom. Again, we talked about AI earlier, social media, another one of those things where the future will likely be shaped by how those technologies develop. Now that'll do it for us here on This Technology on 13 News Now Plus on our live stream. For Sarah Calloway, I'm Connor Real. We hope to see everyone tomorrow.